Okay, so this is our second part of our MyEOC journal entry. I did two today because we missed yesterday and today. I'll probably do one more for tomorrow night because we'll miss tomorrow. So go ahead and put this into your MyEOC journal. Make sure you should have 3. Again, major test grade. This was another missed question on our EOC practice, our mock EOC test. It says identify the independent and dependent values. That's the topic that you need to write down. Now this question says, these points represent the ordered pairs of a function. So this is a function, okay? And remember, a function can be represented by an equation, it can be represented by a graph, it can be represented by a table, mapping, or coordinates. And that's all first 6-week stuff. That's pretty old stuff, okay? So if I have all these coordinates that represent a function, which of the following is a part of the set of dependent values only? So dependent only. So I'm looking for dependent only. Just going to make a note to myself. Okay, so how do we figure that out? Well, first of all, what we're given here are points. So all we know are a whole bunch of points on a graph, or the x and y values, okay? Because each one of these has an x and y value. So that means we have to be able to associate independent and dependent with x and y. And if you remember, again, back to first 6 weeks, the x is your independent variable. So x is the independent variable, meaning that anytime you have an x coordinate or an x point, or the x part of that point, that's your independent variable. So that would be where you identify that. Now, if you're given a graph, because this happens from time to time, and it says identify the independent variable, okay, or value, because again, we're talking about dependent values and independent values. We could also be talking about not only numbers, but we could talk about variables, or we could talk about objects such as price, time, stuff like that. So if I'm looking for an independent or dependent value on a graph, where would I find the independent variable on a graph, or the independent value on a graph? Well, you'd find that on the x-axis. So the dependent is on the independent is found on the x-axis. So if you're ever looking for the independent value, then you would look for numbers on the x-axis. If you're looking for what is the independent and you're looking at a table, you'd look at the label for the x-axis. Okay? So if x is independent variable and it's located on the x-axis, then what does y have to be? Y is obviously then the dependent variable. Okay, and so if that's the dependent variable, then that's going to be found on the y-axis. So if I'm looking for it, I can look for my y-coordinates or something on the y-axis. Another thing is we need to talk about the vocabulary, or the way stuff is communicated. For example, if you say, if I say something like price is a function of time, okay, when I say price is a function of time, that means that your price depends on time. Whenever something is a function of something else, that means that thing depends on the other thing. Price is a function of time. Price depends on time. Height depends on feet. Okay? So height is a function of feet. Those two things go hand in hand. So you can always take the word is a function of and replace it with is dependent on. So just a little side nugget there for you, because that'll come back to haunt you later on. Alright, so knowing this information here, that the x is the independent variable, it's found on the x-axis, and the y is the dependent variable, found on the y-axis, what I could do is I could go through all my points here and label x, y, x, y. Make sure each one has an x and each one has a y. Now, some of my students at 4th period like to say this is very elementary to label the x and y, but if it may help you, then go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and erase these notes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up a set of independent and dependent variables. Okay? So my independent variables, and I'm just going to label it I for independent. My independent function values are all my x's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? I want to try to go ahead and keep them in order if possible. It'll help me compare when I need to compare. Now next, My dependent values are all my y values, so let's try to keep them in order as well. Well, here I have a 1, then I have a 2, then I have a 3, then I have a 4, then I have a 5, whoops, I'm looking at the wrong thing. My 4 was right here, checked the wrong spot. Then I have a 5. Oh, look at that. I don't have a 3. Excuse me. Made some errors here. Let me go ahead and start this over. So I have a 1, a 2, okay, a 4 is next, a 5, and I only have to write it one time because I'm just looking for the values, okay, and then I have a 7. So those are my dependent values, okay? Now here's the deal. The question initially asked me, because I've now identified my independent values and I've identified my dependent values. So my question only asked me to identify a value that is dependent only. Okay, so let's take a look. Is 1 dependent only? Well, no, because 1 is also independent. It's up here in the independent. What about 2? 2's in both. What about 4? 4's in both. We skipped 3 because dependent is not 3. So 4's in both. 5's in both. So the only one that is dependent only is 7. So 7 then would be the answer that matches my question exactly. Now you have to be careful because let me look at the answer choice. Let me tell you the answer choices. On my answer choices it gave me 3. Well, 3 is not even a dependent variable. Okay, so that shouldn't, our value, that shouldn't even have been a factor. But then it gave me 5. Well, 5 is a dependent value, but 5 is also an independent value, which makes that not the answer. And then it gave me 6. Well, again, 6 is not a dependent value at all. And then it gave me 7, which is a dependent value, and it's only dependent. Okay? So that's pretty much it. Not a whole lot of math computation here. It's just understanding vocabulary. Understanding that when it tells you to find the dependent or independent, you know that independent is X, dependent is Y. You can do this other extra work that I did. Not necessarily required. It does help you if you need to. Like I recommend on a test breaking it down so you can compare like I did. Because sometimes on a test, especially if this is question 55, you're going to start getting these numbers mixed up, transposed. Even when I was doing it here for just my second problem of the day, I was kind of rewriting X's when I should have been writing Y's. I even made that simple mistake. So again, not that difficult. This should be a money question, meaning a question that you get right every time. Okay? All right, that's it. If you have any questions, I'll see you in tutoring tomorrow morning.